Okay, my friends, before we even start, I claim dipole electron flood theory solves all the unexplained things. Just like Jupiter. They have no clue what's going on, why all these patterns are showing up on Jupiter. Dipole electron flood theory solves all that. The great red spot actually been shrinking over the past few decades. Not only that, it's sloughed off a bunch of red debris, and now it's pulsating. It did this in 2019. It's turned around, and then it sloughed all this red stuff came off it, and they thought it was going to fall apart. Well, it didn't fall apart, but it now is round, and it is pulsating. And these are the things they can't possibly explain. They look at these clouds and say, well, what the hell is that all about? I can explain this because these are nothing more than layers of molecules that are so compressed that they form like a soup, but in an exact distinct layer because of their specific gravity. Every different type of molecule has a different weight. And when you put them in a centrifuge and really spin them like crazy, they'll layer like that. I'm going to show you blood and all kinds of things from a centrifuge, and this is nothing more than that, enormous amount of gravity. It's 1,300 times, I believe, bigger than Earth, which gives you much, much, much more pull towards its core. That's how gravity works, and that's why these are in layers. Okay, my outstanding friends, strap in, buckle up, get ready, put your spacesuits on. We are heading to Jupiter. Now, I have a series of outstanding pictures from Jupiter, graphic as can be, and they are having a whole lot of problems trying to understand all of these formations that are all over Jupiter. I think I can explain the origin of these formations and why, and they're absolutely amazing when I show you these cloud formations. And I believe the reason for these formations is what's called specific gravity. And I'll explain that. Okay, let's just look at this and rationalize what's going on here. These are literally different substances. And when I say substances, what does that mean? They are different densities of materials. So they layer in different layers. And why would they layer in different layers? Because of the gravitational influence of Jupiter. It's so gravitationally attractive, it separates out all these different materials into different layers of compression. Exactly what a centrifuge does. Hypergravity. Okay, my outstanding friends, buckle up, and I mean buckle tight, because we're going to start our look at Jupiter. All of the latest research is in, and wow. All right, here's what's going up on Jupiter. It's strictly a matter of compressing the layers of density. So the denser the stuff is, the further it goes towards the center, because that's where the gravitation is. Does a centrifuge mimic gravity? They spin around like crazy, and you put fluids in them, and they separate out very, very exactly. It says, yes, a centrifuge does mimic the effects of gravity through the concept of centrifugal force. Now, let's just cut down to the thing down here. It says, the force is proportional to the speed of the rotation. The faster it spins, the harder it pushes. The distance from the center, in many cases, it can far exceed Earth's gravitational pull, which is 1 gravity, 1 g. Now, on Mars, on Jupiter, it's about 1,300 g, something like that. It allows scientists to simulate hypergravity conditions, which is what Jupiter is. It's so gigantic. In biological and material science experiments, the simulation gravitational force can be used to separate substances of different densities. Every substance has a different density. As denser materials move outward, away from the spin, mimicking the way gravity would pull them downward into the gravitational field. So they're pulling all of those particles down. All right, remember what you're seeing here. Here it is, and it's pulling all that stuff down and layering it in layer and layer and layer. So as it spins, it's twisting all those layers in and around themselves, making vortexes and all kind of crazy. You see these different colors? The reason you have different colors here is because at the northern poles, it's not really spinning much. The whole thing is spinning, so this is just spinning a little bit. Down here, around the outside, it's spinning like crazy at the furthest outside of the spin. This spins like a many more times speed than up here at the poles. And the same thing happens on Earth. Identical, except Earth does not crush all the gases down so hard that they layer. These are layers, and they're just flopping layers into layers, just making them spin into each other. Okay, this talks about the enormous magnetic field that Jupiter creates because of its intense, gravity, basically. Okay, my friends, a magnetic field is caused by particles scrubbing other particles and creating fields that expand. That's exactly what this is doing, and it actually talks about it. And the magnetic charge goes in the same direction the planet rotates. Yes, because it's scrubbing against the particles that are coming at it. So, and then it talks about the most beautiful outcome of this fierce magnetic field is the aurora found at Jupiter's poles. And that's because that's where the most intense scrub is. That's where all your particles are scrubbing like crazy at the poles, creating these huge waves of magnetic fields. And I can show you that in some pictures. All right, as I explained, a centrifuge creates super gravity. Now this is blood, and this is in a centrifuge. Now I believe this is probably artery blood. And it goes up to where you have vein blood here, which is almost black. Your vein is blue in the anatomical drawings. When it gets exposed to air, it basically turns black. And your vein is primarily this type of blood, which is a hematite. A magnetite. It's the red, dark black blood. I'm sorry, getting confused. Now, the red blood is in your arteries. Now, what is all this yellow stuff? Well, that's plasma. And why is it so much involved where you have the vein blood? Because they mix together right at the same spot as the vein is. The plasma is pulled out just before the blood is dumped into the vein. I'm not kidding you. And this is the separation. But this is due to supergravity. And it is spin like hell. So the heaviest part, which is the black, goes to the outside, and the red is next, and then the plasma comes next, because the plasma doesn't have any of the metals in it. The magnetite, which makes iron, black iron, is obviously the heaviest. It's going to the bottom. So what's happening on Jupiter is all of the gases, the actual gases, are layering just like this. And then as they spin against each other and hit, I think there's probably bumps on Jupiter, and they start to swirl around these bumps, just like the red spot. The red spot's a bump. I don't care what anybody says, that is a bump. Okay, so here's the important part. The centrifuge mimics the way gravity would pull things downward in a gravitational field and just layer them in their molecular densities, their weights, pushing down against each other, just layer after layer after layer, just like soup. You could spoon that out with a spoon. It's going to be that dense. It's 1,300 times or so more gravity than here on Earth. They have all kinds of different statements that they make. I don't believe virtually anything they're saying anymore. Now they're talking about there's no surface on Jupiter. It's just a liquid planet, or it's just a gaseous giant. No, it's all those gases are crushed down, and there may be some unknown physics going on underneath. They talk about liquid metals. Well, that's possible, because you got so much gravity there. So could the core be liquid? Possibly. But I can tell you one thing that's absolutely certain in my mind is the core is going to be dense with the black particles, which are the muons, which are the other side of the white particles. And that's the dipole electron flood theory. Is that planet is nothing more than a gigantic proton. And here's what a proton looks like. The center is going to be dark matter. I don't care what anybody says. That's the attractor. That's gravity. That wants that white particles pulled down so hard that they will just crush each other to get at that. The bigger it gets, the crusher they get. The bigger it gets, the crushier and crushier it gets. And it will crush all of those particles down to where they're in their own little layers, like little membranes around it, just like this here. All right, and that's the crush. Now this is a proton. It has basically the same thing. So, but Jupiter is gases, so they're molecular compounds. This is the basic particle. The smallest particle exists is a proton, other than light. And then you get down to the muon and the electron neutrino, which I have shown or will. All right, look at this carefully. The planet is spinning this direction. This is a bump. It's a bump. And that bump has to plow through all of these gases, which are layered, and it has to plow its bump through that. So what happens? This goes this direction, which is the upper latitude, goes this direction, and then swirls into these clouds. This comes down this way and just makes its own little swirls. This is not the source of these swirls. The source of the swirls is this bump plowing through these particles. Now I'm going to show you a different shot, but don't forget this is the great red spot, and at one time it was in this shape like this. Well, it's turned into a round spot, and it's sloughed off a bunch of red stuff all over the place, and they thought it was going to fall apart. Well, it's just the opposite. Right now it's starting to contract and pulsate like this. They have no explanation for that. It no longer looks like this. All right, so don't forget, here's their statements. Jupiter has no surface. Here's how that's actually possible. Now, like I said, they could have something to do with liquid metals. That's possible. No solid ground, no surface. I think they're talking mostly it's gases, but then they talk about liquid metals, and that's a possible. I can't say that's not possible. But I can tell you one thing. It's all layered due to density of the molecules, and they are just going to, just like a centrifuge, they're going to just be layered. And that's basically what happens with specific gravity. And it's specific to the weight of the atom or the molecule. So this nickel will always be heavier than cobalt, and copper is always heavier than nickel. So they will form in those layers just like that, and they do. That's exactly what they would do in a centrifuge. If you had them in a liquid form in a centrifuge spinning like crazy, when you got done you'd see them layered just like the periodic chart. Because they're heavier and heavier and heavier. That's all it is. The heaviest goes to the bottom. Okay, my friends, before we even get started, these are some stunning shots of a lot of different things, primarily Jupiter and its auroras at the poles and its banded separations and its red spot and its dense layers of gases, which they're claiming now there may not even be a surface to Jupiter. Now, I am going to show you some other things here that we have from our experiments, and I can explain to you what they are, but I'm not going to do it right now. All right, now this is some from our experiments. How did that happen? It looks like a black hole in the middle of a galaxy. How did this happen? These are all magnetic fields and dipoles in space. This is done with a cell phone, with an app that shows field signatures. Now, this other stuff here was done by Webb and Hubble and all those different space telescopes. We're going to be focusing in on the red spot because that's what I specialize in, is the red spot. Now, here it was years ago. It says it's the most studied object in our solar system, 7 flybys, 1 still in operation, and they're looking at these features on Mars. Now, I mean on Venus. Oh, jeez, I'm sorry. On Jupiter. All of these things are tied together in other ways, which I'll explain at some point. But let's just get back to Jupiter. This is the Great Red Spot. Now, I have one of the best shots, and I don't remember where it came from, but nobody else I can find has that same shot. I can't remember where it came from, but it is absolutely the red spot, and it is absolutely something that is of great importance. All right, so don't forget, this is what they're showing as a red spot. This is the picture I have, and it is very, very detailed. And if you know what to look for, you can understand what you're seeing. And I do know what to look for, and I do understand what I'm seeing. And one of the things that is the main thing is this right here. You see that little strappy looking thing that comes up here? And then this round ball, and there's a bunch of little holes in it. I don't know if you can see that well, but maybe this will help. I don't know. You see that? That is... All right, as far as I know, this is the best shot I've ever seen that existed of the red spot. Now, the planet is going this direction, and the clouds are pushing past this. I say this is a bump. What's happening here is they're hitting here and forcing this soft tissue to push down this way, and then vortexing around very slightly below. And above, it's another issue here. It comes around this way and forces this actually to spin into here as it trails off this direction. This is the most important part of everything there is on the red spot, because that, my friends, is not clouds. That is literally a Spurlock. All right, I want you to look at this exceptionally carefully. What you're going to see is these two spots here, that dot and that dot. And this is literally a circle. Take your time and look at it carefully. What you see is a circle. All right, and you see these two dots. And what do you see here coming up here and coming up here to that circle? And why is it a different color than what invests down into that circle here? The reason is this is a tendinous strap. I call that the Spurlock. And this is where it latches in, and this is where the transfer, I believe, of the fluids occurs. I'm going to show you one that I have here in my shop. It's identical, but it's in a different part of the body. This is in that vagina. And that is the Spurlock. All right, that is what holds the vagina in place so it doesn't float around in the body. I'm not kidding you. I'm serious. This is the best shot I have ever seen of this particular feature on Venus. Oh, jeez, I keep doing this. On Jupiter. And that's literally the hairline. And these are the tissues that are in the vagina, and up in the top where there's some sort of floppy tissues, and they're being pushed as it's moving through the atmosphere, which is soup. It's literally through soup. This is a fabulous shot, and it proves exactly what I'm saying, because I'm going to show you, the next one is going to be extremely graphic, but it is going to show that spot. Remember that spot right there, that little circle and those two little dots? Well, first of all, let me show you the one I have in my microscope right up here, which is another Spurlock. Here's the two dots. You see it right there? And here's the dot, there's the circle. All right, this whole thing is basically the circle, and then the strap goes back. And those two little dots are where the fluids transfer into the next thing that it held into. This is just a chunk of rock, but it's like, it's a meat. And you can see those, it's very clear what's going on here. And every membrane has its own fascia fluids, and that's where they are. And that's the same thing that's happening down here in that Spurlock in that vagina. Those two little dots, I believe, are the two little dots where those fluids transfer. And that strap is the tendon, very tough, and it holds this thing in place. Otherwise, all your organs are held in place, tendons, muscles, everything, by Spurlocks. And every one of them is a little bit different, but it's a little bit exactly the same. Not a little bit exactly, but pretty close to exactly. Anyway, the next one's going to be very graphic, but it's going to prove what I'm saying, that is a biological part in the body. Okay, it's quite apparent what is happening here. That is the Spurlock. Right there. That's exactly identical to what I showed you and on the great red spot. Now, not only that, the hairline is here, exactly identical. The vaginal canal is there, exactly identical. This is sort of some tissue that is floppy-ish, and it's being pushed this way because we're moving that direction. Remember, that's the shape, and we're moving this direction, and the clouds are swirling around this way. And over this way, they're swirling around this way. And they're pushing this tissue like this, and they're pushing this tissue in like this at the bottom. We can see this in these pictures of the great red spot. If you take your time and look at it and you understand what they just can't get their heads around this. This thing is, I believe it's 3 times bigger than Earth. Venus is approximately the size of Earth. It said in the ancient text, the feared god Jupiter gave birth to a fiery comet, which turned out to be Venus. All of this was chronicled and documented by Velikovsky, who was destroyed by the academics. 10 years ago, I wrote a book about him called Mudfossils and Velikovsky and Minds in Collision. He wrote Worlds in Collision. I call it Minds in Collision, because they destroyed him. Nobody even knew his name. Everybody I would talk to I said, you know what Velikovsky said about Jupiter? I said, no clue. Who's Velikovsky? And some of them would say, oh, that guy was a nutcase. Are you kidding me? You're a crazy person too. Click. And that was it. However, this, my friends, is on Jupiter. And Venus was born from the feared god Jupiter. Take it for what it's worth. And it was born to take vengeance upon Earth, to wipe out the giants, which it did. And then it actually impacted with Mars and wiped Mars off the planet. I mean, off the face of the universe. It wiped all of its atmosphere off and destroyed it, basically. But it had the same life as we have here on Earth, which is gigantic. Absolutely enormously gigantic. Shown at hundreds and hundreds of times. Now, do we have a new president that is going to let us have some reality? Trump is always talking about truth and everything. Now, let's see if this follows through. I've been trying. Nobody in any other previous administration would talk to me or even respond in any way. None of the national laboratories. Now, I want Trump to stand up and say, hey, wait, that's wrong. You guys are not paying attention to your duties. This guy is presenting things. Talk to him. Put him down, or let's discuss it one way or the other. If Trump is a truther, that's what I want. And you should be able to. I can't get through to anybody. I've tried a lot. And I'm just fed up with trying. It's just a waste of time. So if you can help me, help me. If not, well, we stay in the same soup.